Hi everyone. Thank you all for joining our webinar about the ongoing research communities. My name is Anouk and I work at the R&D department of InSites Consulting. And together with Tom de Ruyck, my colleague, we will present this webinar. And in the next 30 minutes, we will show you how you can start with structural collaboration with consumers. First, we will explain what we mean when we talk about research communities and structural collaboration. And we will illustrate this with 3 cases from Heinz, SBS, and Sarah Lee. Second, we will show you how to start collaboration with consumers. And third, how to go from a pilot project and move towards structural collaboration. Tom will start with the first parts.
Yes, and before we explain what a research community is and also what we mean with structural collaboration, let's first explain a bit why we think it's so valuable to collaborate with your customers. And for us, that's very simple. We here at InSites, we believe that customers, your customers, are probably the most effective consultants you can hire. And this for 3 main reasons. First of all, your consumers have a lot of knowledge about your brand. They know your brand already for ages. And if you compare that with how long most brand managers are already in charge for a brand, that's most of the times only a couple of years. So we really think that loyal customers, your fans, have more knowledge about your brand than most of the times the brand manager behind the brand. Secondly, they are also very passionate about your brands. They show extraordinary engagement. And an example that immediately pops up into my mind is one from a community we did 2 years ago for Ben & Jerry's with brand fans. What we saw in that community is that they not only were very positive about the brand and about certain actions the brand had done in the past, they also were sometimes very angry towards the marketeers because some of the things didn't go that well or some of the things were not that good. So on the one hand, your loyal customers have a lot of knowledge about your brand, but on the other hand, they also are very passionate about it and they want the brand to perform very well. And finally, we can say that your customers are probably the only consultants in the world that are always right. And for one simple reason, they buy your brand almost every day. So they are the ones that make that you still have a business. So for those 3 reasons, the fact that they know a lot about your brand, that they show a lot of passion for your brand and they want it to perform very well, and the fact that they buy your products, we think it's key to engage your consumers, to engage with your consumers and to work together with them. And how are we going to do that? We are going to do that in an online research community. And what is an online research community? Well, an online research community is a closed online platform to which we invite a large amount of people to work together with them, to collaborate with them over a longer period of time. And how to compare this methodology of working together, having a dialogue with consumers, with more traditional methodologies to listen to consumers, like focus groups. Well, let's do it, and let's look at those main characteristics that I just mentioned and make the comparison. First of all, it's a closed online platform. So that means that just like for more traditional ways of listening, like a focus group, your secrets are still safe. Secondly, we work together with a larger group of people than we would normally do in, for example, a focus group. Most of the time we work together with around 150 people. By doing that and by having more people in such a group, you have an additional richness because you have a clash of ideas and you have very rich peer-to-peer discussions between people. And thirdly, we are going to work together with those people not for just 2 hours, but for a longer period of time, which means that we can really work together with those people over time. And we cannot only work together with the people in the community, we can also involve a lot of stakeholders that will follow the discussion in the community. So it's important to work together with customers because they are probably the most effective consultants you can hire as a company, and we are going to do that through this new methodology, a research online community. And now Anouk will tell you all about the main ingredients of such a community.
Yes, what do we need to make a great research community? We identify 4 key ingredients here. The first one is the profile of the participants. We work with people that are interested and interesting, and this means that we only invite people that are engaged with either the brand of the community or the topic of the community. This makes them interesting for us and our clients because they have something interesting to say. Second, the number. We usually invite between 50 and 150 people for a community. And this is based on a research that we did for the optimal threads or discussions in a community. We found out that when a thread generates 30 posts or reactions from members, we see a saturation effect occurring of the on-topic arguments. And after that, all the arguments are likely to already have been set. So we see an increase of off-topic arguments. And we calculated that we need between those 50 and 150 people to generate this 30 posts per thread. And not by accident, this happens to be the same amount as researcher Robert Dunbar has found when he was doing research on the maximum amount of social connections that people can maintain. So they also call this the number of Dunbar. So that's second, we need between 50 and 150 people. Third, in terms of objectives, we can set up a community for different purposes, ranging from an early stage of the funnel, which is more inciting, to concept development, brand development, to the actual launch of the product or the campaign. And even in the final phase, the optimizing phase of the product, the brand, or the campaign. And based on these objectives and the type of questions that you want to ask the community, we can set up a community for 3 weeks, a few months, or even ongoing. So we have a bit of flexible duration. And let's take a closer look at these ongoing communities. And here, aiming for structural collaboration does not mean that we immediately or always need a community that is always on. Structural collaboration, according to us, it's about working together with your customers for almost every single day, for every important business decision that you need to take across all the departments of the company. And in our vision, structural collaboration is the end goal. But we will need a step-by-step approach to get there. And communities, they are just a tool that we need along the way. It's more of a means to an end. So, Tom, how do we start with structural collaboration?
I think one of the important things is that we think big, but start small. I think it's very important to keep that big end goal that you just mentioned, Anouk, in mind. We want to work together in the end with consumers almost every single day for every important business decision we want to make within the company across all departments. But we know that for a lot of companies this will be very difficult to do that from the start. That's why we say start small. And to show you that structural collaboration and starting with communities and working with communities is not something only for the happy few. We will go over 3 different cases in which we started with structural collaboration. We started small, but we had that big end goal in mind. And it's a case from SBS, the Dutch television channel, the broadcaster. It's a case also from Sara Lee about coffee, and one from Heinz. The first one is one from the broadcaster SBS. And what did we do for SBS? We did 3 different communities, one for each of their main channels, Net5, SBSS, and Veronica. So we set up a pilot project that we ran for 3 weeks, and after that the community became inactive for a period, meaning that our moderators did not actively post new topics anymore. But as a follow-up of the initial 3 weeks communities, we started to reactivate the community every 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks when there were important new questions within the company, and the different teams behind each of the television channels could ask new questions during each of those reactivation weeks to the viewers. And by doing that, we had a very cost-efficient way of having an ongoing dialogue with consumers. The second example is one from Sara Lee, and it's slightly different. Sara Lee has set up a community for all their coffee brands, and it was a community with coffee lovers. So this time, not a specific brand was behind the community, but there were a lot of brands, and we had it under the coffee team umbrella. What did we do in the community? We solved in the first 3 months a lot of really strategic questions. Where do we need to go with our coffee brands? So it really was input for a very strategic marketing plan for the coffee category within Sara Lee. And after the 3-month period, the community was closed down. But again, here we will reactivate the community in the course of the next 12 months when we need it, when there is a big marketing campaign, when there is a big wave of new innovations. And Sara Lee will also translate this new approach not only towards all the other countries in which they have an important coffee business, but also towards the tea business. So structural collaboration, it's not only about reactivating the dialogue with consumers in time, it's also about translating the approach to other categories or sometimes other countries. And finally, we have the example of Heinz, for which we run the community Food and Zo, a community about food. It's a community with more than 150 housewives in the Netherlands. And what do we do in the community? We connect the whole Dutch marketing team with those housewives who buy the Heinz products, because it's not only about Heinz ketchup, it's about all the products Heinz as an umbrella brand is bringing to the market in the Netherlands. We have a whole bunch of different things that we do in that community. The first goal of the community is to confront the marketing team with how consumers really live. And the second goal is to really help them to make better decisions faster on a daily basis. So it's to solve very tactical issues, like I have 2 different packages, which one will be the best, which one will perform best in the market. I have 2 different claims to put on this pack, which is the one consumers really understand, very tactical things. But also we have a new TV commercial for brand X or Y. can we make it better by having input from consumers that again will help our advertising agency to do a better job? So that's very tactical, next to feeling consumers, but we also ask them very strategic questions, like we discussed with those housewives. What is going on in terms of food? So we try to understand the more macro trends that are going on when it comes to food and how Heinz can jump on those trends. And how did Heinz move from a very small start towards structural collaboration? Well, we started 3 years ago with a community that was already always on, but that was used at low frequency and low intensity. And over the course of the last 3 years, every year, Heinz used the community in a more intense way, so more questions were asked in a higher frequency. And we also saw that Heinz involved along the way more stakeholders to make use of the community. In the beginning, it was only the Dutch marketing team, but now also customer service, R&D is asking questions from time to time. So we saw 3 examples of how you can start small but think big, and how you can move step by step towards structural collaboration. It can be about starting with just a 3-week project and reactivating that. It can be starting with a 3-month project and think in a very strategic way about a whole category, reactivate that and translate that approach to other countries and other categories. Or it can be you already start quite big, but you make it bigger along the way by making more frequent use of it and by involving more stakeholders. So by now we know that it's important to work together with consumers and that they are probably the most effective consultants you can hire as a company. We know what a community is and how it's different from more traditional approaches like focus groups. Anouk has also given you the 4 main ingredients of a community, and we saw that it's not only for the happy few. You can make a small start but end up with really structural collaboration. And now Anouk will give us the recipe of making that start and doing that pilot project.
Yes, let's take a look at what we need to get started. We identified 5 factors that influence a great start with structural collaboration and that will make your first community project a success. And these factors are based upon our experiences, but also my colleagues Tom and Steven van Bellegem, they recently done 15 interviews with C-level executives on how to make communities successful internally. And the first one is to choose a pilot project. If you start your first community, you need to pick a pilot project that is linked to the right and to relevant objectives of the project team. One of the things that we learned over the past years is that the community needs to fit the organizational culture. To give an example here, at Heinz, they work with quarterly marketing plans. So the marketeers, they need to reach their quarterly objectives. As a consequence, they use the community for more short-term decision making. So the community is successful if it generates immediate inspiration for on-the-job decision making. So the community needs to have a direct impact here. That's just key for this project. Second, it's very important to involve key influencers in the pilot projects. And if I say involve, it does not mean support, but real involvement. For example, the CEO of the Belgian advertising agency Famous, he is so dedicated with the community that he now starts every internal meeting just asking what the community has said about this issue or this question. And this makes that all employees at Famous understand the true value and the importance of using the community. Third factor is to measure your success. To make your pilot a successful one, it's key to know what your KPIs are. up front to be able to conclude at the end whether it really was successful or not. And if the pilot was successful, you really need to celebrate this success and promote the value of collaborating with consumers internally. And now Tom is going to explain how we can create impact with these consumer collaborations.
Yeah, I think in order to understand what the KPIs need to be that we need to measure, we need to understand what kind of impact we can generate both internally and externally with a research community. Of course, internally it's all about making sure that what we learn from the community is actually used, that the research has an impact on the decisions that are made, on the products that are produced, and on the communication campaigns that go out. So there it's all about having impactful communication of the research results that make that the research results are used. When it comes to external communication, it's all about showing to the world that you're a company that listens to consumers. And that's also the type of impact that we need to measure when we talk about KPIs. So, what I will do in the next couple of slides is dive into how can we generate that internal impact, how can we make sure that research results are used, and how can we have also external impact and make sure that there are also marketing leverage effects to what we do in the community. First, I will go over how to create internal impact with your research results. And at InSites, we believe that if you want to communicate research results in a very impactful way, you should follow a three-step procedure. Engage, inspire, and activate. Engage is about confronting the people that need your research to see your research results in a very engaging way, and you confront them with the consumer world and with their own knowledge. When it comes to inspire, it's about presenting them the real insights in a very engaging way during a very engaging workshop. And finally, when it comes to activate, it's about making sure that the research results are really used. You help the external stakeholders within the company to move on towards the next step. I will show a couple of examples of the type of tools that we have available to perform very well in each of these three stages. When it comes to engage, what we sometimes do is before the actual workshop, we ask all the people who will be present, the internal stakeholders, the internal clients of our client, to play an online game, to play a little quiz about the key insights, about the key learnings that we had. What happens? It's a quiz of, most of the time, 10 questions, and they play the game. They play the quiz, and immediately after they have given an answer, they see if they were right or wrong. And it's not we who tell them that they were right or wrong, but it's a consumer who tells them that they were right or wrong. This through a picture, a quote, or a small video. And at the end, when you have played the game, when you have answered the 10 questions, you also get a score. And I can tell you, if you get a 4 out of 10, that does something with you. What we know is that it creates what we call positive disruption. You all of a sudden realize that you need to go to that workshop, that you need to know more about that specific subject. So what you create by asking people to play that game, you create curiosity, and sometimes you also create the feeling, I need to know more about the subject. And then they come to your workshop. And of course, here we have all kinds of presentation techniques to make it very engaging, to really make it a very engaging way of presenting the research results. But sometimes we don't need to present, or we are not capable to present in a small group of approximately 5 to 10 people, but we need to report back to almost a whole company. And that was the case for Unilever R&D, where we needed to report back to 640 employees of the R&D plant in Vlaardingen in the Netherlands. And we thought, we can organize some kind of conference on which we present the results, but that would probably not be the best idea. So why not bring a news website online within the company, where during the whole community we can every single working day share 2 new pieces of information, 2 news articles with the people internally. And news articles not about the real world, but about what happened in the community, about what we learned in the community. Sometimes we also have to report not only to a big audience, but to a very different audience. And that was the case in the community that we did for Heineken, where it was about co-creating the Club of the Future together with youngsters from all over the world. And we needed to report not to researchers, but to very creative people, to young, talented designers. And we knew upfront that if we just would present them with a boring PowerPoint deck, that it wouldn't work, that they would never use the research results. So we used a new way of reporting. We created an iPad app of 6 different sceneries in which each time 5 insights were outlined to report those 30 insights, those 30 key findings towards them in a new way, in a way that was fitting their way of working and their lifestyle. So after we have engaged them with the consumer world, after we have inspired them with a engaging presentation or through new ways of reporting, we need to activate them. We need to make sure that they move from insights towards actions and next steps. And of course, during such a workshop, we have brainstorm techniques, or if it's about concept development, we do some concept writing in small groups, but sometimes we need to take the actions beyond that final workshop. And that was the case in the global youth community we did for MTV. What we found there is that it would be important for the brand managers that are behind the brands that advertise with MTV to understand Gen Y to the max and to really live for one day and one night like Generation Y. So in order to make it an ongoing learning experience, we created a city guide for those brand managers behind those big brands with all the hotspots that we have found in the community that the youngsters, the cool youngsters in the community had shown us. And we have given that city guide to the brand managers. So if they were traveling, if they were in London or New York, what could they do? Well, they could follow that user-generated city guide and go and eat where those young Gen Yers eat, go and shop where those youngsters shop, and so live for one day and one night really like Generation Y. So that's internal communication. What do you get if you communicate your research results in this way, in 3 steps: engage, inspire, activate? Well, we see that there is talked more about your research, because you not only have those 2 hours of presenting to confront them with the results and with the consumer world, but you have a period that is far longer, before the presentation and after the presentation. And we see that by doing that, research is used more. So we are more impactful with our research results. We also see that by immersing them in the consumer world for a longer period of time, instead of only those 2 hours, they get some kind of consumer feeling. They not only understand the research results better, they not only use the research results more, but they also create a more general understanding of consumers. So this is about internal communication and internal impact. What about generating external impact and having a great external way of communicating? Because consumers want today that companies listen to them. Why, if we do that, would we not only also communicate that to the outer world? And when it comes to external communication, you can do three things. You can talk about the process, the outcome, and the learnings. Talking about the process is communicating to the world that you actually do this, that you listen to consumers. A great example is what Telenet did with us last year. We had a community for Yellow, that app on iPhone and Android phones that allows people to watch television on their smartphones, and it was not 100% ready. It was 90% ready. And Duco, the CEO of Telenet, said during a press conference, "We cannot finish it alone. We need you as a potential user to finish it with us, to get to the last 10%. So during that press conference, he invited potential users to become part of a community of 100 people who would finish the app together with the internal team during 3 weeks' time. So that's really communicating to the world, we want to listen, we are a company that listens. Communicating about the outcome is what Heineken did. I just talked about co-creating the Club of the Future together with youngsters from all over the world, with a team of designers that was listening to those youngsters. Well, Heineken actually built that club. It was built in Milan during the last design fair over there, and they really communicated to the world in press releases how that club looked like and what the influence was of those youngsters in the final design. And finally, it's also about communicating about the learnings. We once did a community for Chiquita to understand what the physical and mental benefits were of eating fruit. And when they launched their new smoothie offering, we used what we learned, what the physical and mental benefits were of eating fruit, on the website that was used to launch the product. So what we learned from consumers with real consumer quotes, with almost testimonials, was used in communication. So the learnings. So you can communicate about the fact that you're doing it, about what the outcomes are, and about what you have learned. So great internal communication is to impact internally and the fact that your research is really used. Great external communication makes that you have a marketing leverage effect. So we now know what communities are, what the power of communities can be. We know how to make a start and what the things are that you need to take into account when doing your pilot project. That it's important to have great communication both internally and externally to have the maximal impact, and that also based on that impact you need to define your KPIs that you need to measure and to celebrate your success afterwards. And look how to move from here after that pilot project, how to move towards that big end goal, structural collaboration.
Yes, after the pilot project has run and you've celebrated your success, how do you move to structural collaboration? That's the question. Well, one of the key things to keep in mind when moving towards this collaboration is to take it step by step. Growing the value of your community is like an evolution. You can push it. You must make sure that people experience the benefits of collaborating with consumers. And for this to happen, it's just about convincing more internal stakeholders every single day. And once they have experienced this, you can take it to the next level and go cross-department. Ultimately, a community is not a tool that is only relevant for the research department or the marketing department. No, it's something that is valuable for other departments as well, like IT, HR, and sales. It's about breaking the silo thinking and putting the consumer at the center of the organization. And in the end, we will need a new board member, the Chief Consumer Officer, and this person will represent the customer in the boardroom. Well, having that said, this brings me to the final slide of our webinar. And there are 3 things that we would like you to remember from our presentation. Well, 1, your customers are the best consultants. So good news, they are for hire. Second, structural collaboration is the end goal, and getting there requires a step-by-step approach. And finally, third, pilot project is the first step towards structural collaboration. Just choose it wisely. Thank you everyone for your attention. Are there any questions that you would like to ask? Please type your questions in the chat window.
So we have a first question from Olivier. How do we choose a pilot project? Very good question. We have done research about that, and it's from the same study that Anouk was already referring to, the study that we conducted among 15 C-level executives of global brands who already collaborate more or less in a structural way with consumers. We also asked them what's important in choosing a pilot project. What do we see? First of all, it needs to be in line with your company culture. That's a very important first step. Anouk talked about Heinz, where they are very much focused on getting the next target. So the community needs to have an impact on day-to-day decisions. And in the short term, you need to see what the community brings to the table. While the project that I was talking about at Unilever R&D, it was bring the consumer inside the R&D department. So normally scientists that work over there are very much focused on figures and scientific results. The goal of management here was we want them to feel who consumers are. If they understand consumers, if they understand consumer behavior better, if they know how consumers live their daily lives, they will make better products. So there the goal was totally different. It was bringing the consumer into the company, more a long-term vision. While, for example, for the advertising agency that we also work for, Famous in Belgium, what we see there is that for an advertising agency, it's a very much a creative culture. So you don't need to position your community more as research, as evaluating the creative things that the advertising people make. No, you need to position it as inspiration for the creative people to even be more creative and to even perform better. So that's the first important aspect. If you choose your pilot project, let it fit within the company culture. Don't try to change the company culture with your pilot project. Think wisely. Does it have to have a direct impact on business? Is it more like bringing the consumer into the company, and how to position it so that it's not threatening for people within the company? A second important aspect is that you think very wisely about the objectives. For a pilot project, what we always advise is think about something that is high on the agenda, but that you don't know a lot of. That makes that you have an easy start. It's important for the company, and not a lot is known. So if you start to build understanding about an issue, a lot of people within the company will be interested. And thirdly, think very wisely about the stakeholders that you are going to involve and where you start. Don't start with involving all departments of the company. Start with one department who is ready for it, and most of the time it's the marketing department. So three things that are important in choosing your pilot project. It's think about the culture and let it fit within the current culture. Think wisely about the objective and don't make it too difficult for yourself. And thirdly, start to involve departments that are ready for it. So that are the three dimensions. So I hope, Olivier, that this answers your questions. Are there other questions from other people? Things that you want to know, that you want an illustration of? think if there are no questions anymore, this will be it for this webinar. What we will do is we will... Oh, there's the last one. Anyway, we will also send you the recordings afterwards. We will also ask you to evaluate this webinar in a very short survey. And if you have questions, you can always mail or tweet to myself or Anouk, and we are very happy to answer all your questions or to think along with you if you would have a specific challenge. So thank you very much for joining us, and I hope to hear you back or see you back at one of our offline events or at one of the next webinars that are scheduled. But for now, bye bye.